Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and for today's video, we will be talking about Southeast Asian poetry including China, India, Indonesia, and Japan. And now we'll begin in Chinese poetry. Poetry has always played an important part in Chinese life. From the dawn of Chinese history, there have been poems. Sometimes poetry seems to be the very voice of the people. There's a great number of poems in the Book of Verses, or Shaking, which is the first anthology of poems, dating from the 5th century BC, describe the actions of daily life, sing the praises of seasonal occupations, and sometimes criticize bad administrators. One of their famous poetry is entitled Thoughts in the Silent Night, written by Levi. Moonlight reflects off the front of my bed, with actually be the frost on the ground. I look up to view the bright moon and look down to reminisce about my hometown. Thoughts in the Silent Night was written by famous Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai. The poem expresses the poet's loneliness, nostalgia, and homesickness as he gazes at the bright moon. Li Bai would go on to create close to 1,000 poems in his lifetime, capturing the political landscape and the natural beauty of China in elegant prose. And now we'll proceed to Indian's literature. Indian's literature has a long history dating back to Vedic times. The poetry reflects diverse spiritual traditions within India. In particular, many Indian poets have been inspired by mystical experiences. Poetry is the oldest form of literature and has a rich written and oral tradition. And it has been written in numerous languages including Sanskrit, Hindi, Oriya, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Bengali, Urdu, Persian, and English. And one of their famous poetry is entitled An Introduction, written by Kamala Das. Here is the excerpt. It is I who laugh, it is I who make love, and then feel shame, it is I who lie dying, with a rattle in my throat. I am sinner, I am saint, I am the beloved and the betrayed. I have no joys that are not yours, no aches which are not yours. I too call myself I. This is an autobiographical poem which throws light on the life and work of Kamala Das. Das begins the poem by saying that she doesn't understand politics, but she knows the name of politicians, probably referring to the fact that power is in the hands of a few elites and that it is usually males who run the country. She then gives a brief introduction of herself before she focuses on English, being the medium she uses to express herself. How people criticize her for that and why it is no one's business other than herself. The primary focus of the poem is the situation of women in a patriarchal society and the unjust burdens women have to go through in this male-dominated world. Kamala Das or Kamala Saraya is one of the best-known Indian female poets, and this is her most famous work. Now we'll go to Indonesian literature or Indonesian poetry. It is the poetry and prose writings in Javanese, Malay, Sundanese, and other languages of the peoples of Indonesia. They include works orally transmitted and then preserved in written form by the Indonesian people, oral literature, and the modern literature that began to emerge in the early 20th century as a result of Western influence. One of their famous poetry is entitled Punggung Sepasang Kekasih, or Spines of a Pair of Lovers. And here is the excerpt. This feeling wants to cling to your back, to feel you from behind. When the sun shines inside chest, the burning grassland tickles feet, about unplanned falls, you and me like a pair of pelicans. Explicate our feelings, which blindly wander. There is no subtle look from parting backs of two lovers, wordless and slightless distance. I have chosen quiet and circular paths, deceiving farewell to send my chest home. To your dauntless back who can safeguard the thunder within. These poems were written by Theodosia Ramda and Wesley Johannes. Interestingly, all the poems are set in juxtaposition. Ramdas are in recto, while Johannes are in verso. This style is a reminiscence of the traditional Malay style of reciprocating poems. In the tradition, poems made up of 4 lines verse are exchanged between the two parties, and this exchange, which could go on all night, forms a dialogue. In this style of reciprocated poems, both Ramde and Johannes offer numerous excellent dialogues on their common love and longing. And for the last, we'll go into Japanese literature. Japanese literature is the body of written works produced by Japanese authors in Japanese or in its earliest beginnings at a time when Japan had no written language, in the Chinese classical language. Since the middle of 19th century, the major forms of Japanese poetry have been tanka, or the modern name for waka, haiku, and shi, or Western style poetry. Today, the main forms of Japanese poetry include both experimental poetry and poetry that seeks to revive traditional ways. And one of their famous poetry is entitled The Narrow Road to the Deep North, or Okuno Hosimichi, written by Matsuo Basho. And here is the excerpt. The months and days are the travelers of eternity. The years that come and go are also voyagers. Those who float away their lives on ships or who grow old leading horses are forever journeying, and their homes are wherever their travels take them. Many of the men of old died on the road, and I, too, for years past, have been steered by the sight of solitary cloud drifting with the wind to ceaseless thoughts of roaming. The Narrow Road to the Deep North, or Okuno Hosemichi, is a travel writing with haiku poems by Matsuo Basho. He departed with the disciple Kawai Sora, March 27 in 1689, traveled around Tohoku region, and reached Ogaki August 21. The journey finished when he visited Ai Shrine. It took more than 150 days, and the walking distance was 2,400 kilometers and about 1,490 miles. This travel writing gets a high reputation as the finest and perfect among Basho's travels, and it is considered as one of the best traveling works in the history of Japanese literature. The sentences and haiku poems interact with each other to form a poetic world. In addition, he saw the facts of the journey as a material of the literature. In order to aim for completion as a literary work, he developed an idea without seeking to whether it was fact or not. So that's all for today's video. I hope you learned something. Thank you.